She came in on a Tuesday morning and told me she'd been feeling like her brain was running behind all day, every day. Not confused, not forgetting big things, just slow, like there was a delay between hearing something and really processing it. She'd notice it when her daughter called and asked a quick question. She'd need the daughter to repeat it, not because she didn't hear it, but because it hadn't quite landed yet. She said it felt like trying to listen through a bad phone connection, even though the line was clear. She also mentioned that by late afternoon, she couldn't finish sentences the way she wanted to. The words were there somewhere, but they wouldn't come out in the right order. And then, maybe an hour later, after she'd been sitting quietly, everything would clear up again. She'd feel sharp. She could talk normally. She could follow the news without rewinding. But the cycle would start over the next morning. I asked her what her mornings looked like. She said she got up around 6, made coffee, checked her phone for messages, turned on the television, and started getting ready. She didn't sit still much. She moved from room to room. She said she liked to stay busy because it made her feel productive, but she also said that by the time she left the house, or even by the time she sat down to eat breakfast, she already felt a little tired. Not physically tired, mentally tired, like she'd already used up part of her day. That's when I started noticing a pattern I'd been seeing in a lot of older adults. Not all of them, but enough that it felt like something worth talking about. The pattern wasn't about memory loss or anything dramatic. It was about how the brain handles input when it's already working hard just to stay organized. And what I realized over time was that a lot of people were overloading their brains before they even started their day. Not with big tasks, just with noise, with decisions, with stimulation that didn't feel like stimulation because it was so normal. Let me explain what I mean by that. Your brain, especially after 60, doesn't process information the same way it did when you were 30 or 40. That's not a decline in the way most people think about it. It's a shift in how the system prioritizes and filters. When you're younger, your brain can handle a lot of simultaneous input without much effort. You can listen to music, watch something on a screen, have a conversation, and make a decision about dinner all at the same time. Your brain just sorts it out in the background. But as you get older, the brain becomes more selective. It still works, it still processes, but it needs a little more time to do it well. And when you flood it with input early in the day, messages, notifications, television, decisions about what to wear or what to eat or who to call, you're essentially asking it to run at full capacity before it's had a chance to warm up. It's like turning on every appliance in your house at the same time and wondering why the lights flicker. That's the electrical circuit metaphor I use a lot when I talk to patients about this. Your brain isn't broken, it's just getting more signal noise than it can handle cleanly. And when that happens, you get delays. You get that foggy feeling. You get the sense that you're a step behind, even though you're doing everything right. So I asked her if she'd be willing to try something small. Not a big routine, not a life overhaul. Just one thing for 30 seconds to a minute right when she woke up. Before the coffee, before the phone, before anything else. I asked her to sit at the edge of her bed, feet flat on the floor, and take 5 or 6 slow breaths. Not meditation, not breathing exercises, just slow, quiet breaths while she sat still and didn't look at anything or think about anything in particular. She looked at me like I was suggesting something either too simple to matter or too strange to take seriously. But she said she'd try it. I told her to do it for a week and see if anything changed. Not in a big way, just in how the first hour of her day felt. She came back 3 weeks later, not 2 weeks, 3. And the first thing she said was that she didn't think it was working at first. She said the first few days felt awkward. She kept wanting to get up and start moving. She kept thinking about what she needed to do. But by the end of the first week, she noticed that the mornings felt a little less rushed, even though she wasn't doing anything differently after those 60 seconds. She said it was like her brain had a little more room to work with. By the second week, she noticed she wasn't asking her daughter to repeat things as much. And by the third week, she realized she was getting through the whole morning without that foggy, delayed feeling. She still had moments in the afternoon where she felt tired, but they didn't hit as hard and they didn't last as long. I asked her what she thought was happening. She said she didn't know. She just knew that starting the day with a minute of stillness seemed to change the way everything else unfolded. She said it felt like giving her brain a chance to boot up properly instead of forcing it to run while it was still loading. And that's exactly what was happening. When you wake up, your brain is transitioning out of sleep. It's shifting from a state where it's been consolidating memories and clearing out waste to a state where it's ready to process new information. That transition takes time. Not a lot of time, but it's not instant. And if you immediately flood it with input, light, sound, decisions, tasks, you're interrupting that transition. You're asking it to process before it's ready. And that creates strain. The strain doesn't feel like strain in the moment. It just feels like normal life. But over the course of hours, that strain accumulates. It shows up as mental fatigue, as trouble finding words, as that sense that you're not quite keeping up, even though you're not doing anything unusually hard. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't a cure for anything. It's not going to reverse cognitive decline if that's already happening. It's not going to fix a sleep disorder or a thyroid problem or depression. But for a lot of older adults, especially those who are otherwise healthy but just feel like their brain isn't as sharp as it used to be, this kind of small, quiet start to the day can make a real difference. The reason it works has to do with something called cognitive load. Cognitive load is just a term for how much your brain is trying to handle at any given moment. When the load is low, your brain works efficiently. You think clearly. You remember things. You process conversations without effort. When the load is high, everything gets harder. You forget what you were about to say. You lose track of what someone just told you. You feel mentally exhausted even though you haven't done anything physically demanding. Most people don't realize how much of their cognitive load comes from things that don't feel like tasks. Checking your phone adds load. Watching television adds load. Making decisions, even small ones like what to eat or what to wear, adds load. And when you stack all of those things up in the first 30 minutes of your day, you're using up a significant portion of your brain's capacity before you've even started the things you actually need to focus on. That 60 seconds of stillness in the morning doesn't add anything. It just gives your brain a chance to settle, to finish waking up without interference, to establish a baseline of calm before the day starts pulling at your attention. And for a lot of people, that's enough to change how the rest of the day feels. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this sounds too simple. Or maybe you're thinking, you've tried things like this before and they didn't help. And I get that. I'm not saying this works for everyone. I'm saying it worked for her. And I've seen it work for enough other people that it's worth talking about. But here's the thing. It only works if you actually do it. And it only works if you do it consistently. Not perfectly, but consistently. Because the benefit isn't in one morning. It's in the pattern. It's in training your brain to expect a moment of quiet before the noise starts. Over time, that expectation becomes automatic. Your brain starts to settle faster. It handles the transition from sleep to waking more smoothly. And that smoother transition shows up as better focus, better recall, and less of that foggy, delayed feeling. She also told me something else that I thought was interesting. She said that after a couple of weeks, she started noticing when she didn't do it. If she skipped that minute in the morning because she woke up late or because she just forgot, she could feel the difference by mid-morning. She said the day felt harder, not impossible, just harder, like she was working a little bit uphill the whole time. That's the thing about small habits like this. You don't always notice them when you're doing them, but you notice when you stop. Now, let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because I think a lot of people here sit quietly and breathe and either think it's too vague or they overcomplicate it. You don't need to sit in any particular position. You don't need to close your eyes. You don't need to count your breaths or focus on your breathing in any special way. You just sit. At the edge of the bed is fine. in a chair is fine, wherever you are when you first wake up, feet flat on the floor, because that helps you feel grounded, hands in your lap or on your knees, and then you just breathe, slowly. In through your nose if that's comfortable, out through your mouth if that feels natural. But there's no technique here, there's no goal. You're not trying to relax, you're not trying to clear your mind, you're just sitting still and breathing while your brain finishes waking up. 30 seconds is enough, if that's all you can manage. 60 seconds is better, 90 seconds is great, but don't set a timer, don't count. Just sit until it feels like enough. For most people, that's somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds. You'll know when it's time to get up, it'll just feel right. And then you go about your day. You don't need to do anything else differently. You don't need to add more habits or change your routine, just that 1 minute at the start. That's it. Now, I also want to talk about what happens if this doesn't work, because not everything works for everyone, and I think it's important to know when something isn't the right fit. If you try this for 2 weeks and you don't notice any difference, no change in how your mornings feel, no change in mental clarity, no change in how tired you are by the afternoon, then it's probably not the right tool for you. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, it just means your brain might need something else. For some people, the issue isn't about cognitive load at the start of the day, it's about sleep quality. Or it's about medication side effects. Or it's about blood sugar or hydration or a dozen other things that can affect how your brain functions. So if this doesn't help, don't assume nothing will help. Just talk to your doctor and figure out what else might be going on. But if you do try it and you notice even a small difference, if the mornings feel a little easier, if you're a little sharper in conversations, if you're not as tired by lunch, then keep doing it, because those small differences add up. Over weeks and months, they can change how you experience your day, not in a dramatic way, just in a way that makes life a little bit easier. She also asked me, during that follow-up visit, whether she should be doing anything else. She wanted to know if there were other things she should add to protect her brain. And I told her the same thing I tell most of my patients. Start with one thing. Get good at it. Let it become part of your routine. And then, if you want to add something else, you can. But don't try to overhaul your whole life at once, because that almost never sticks. The brain, especially as you get older, responds better to small, consistent changes than it does to big, sudden ones. It's not about doing everything right. It's about doing 1 or 2 things regularly and letting them build on each other over time. Now, I want to come back to something I mentioned earlier because I think it's important. This habit, this 60 seconds of stillness, works best when it's done first thing. Before you check your phone, before you turn on the television, before you start thinking about your to-do list. The reason that matters is because those first few minutes of the day set the tone for how your brain handles everything that comes after. If the first thing you do is look at your phone, your brain immediately shifts into reactive mode. You're responding to messages. You're processing information. You're making decisions about what needs your attention. And all of that happens before your brain has had a chance to fully transition out of sleep. So you're starting the day in a state of mild stress, even if it doesn't feel stressful. But if the first thing you do is sit quietly for a minute, your brain stays in a more neutral state. It finishes waking up without pressure. And when you do start your day, when you do check your phone or start making breakfast or whatever comes next, your brain is ready for it. It's not still trying to catch up. That difference might seem small, but over the course of a day, it's significant, and over the course of weeks and months, it's even more significant. She also told me, near the end of that visit, that she'd started noticing other things too. She said she was sleeping a little better, not every night, but more nights than before. She said she wasn't waking up as much in the middle of the night, and when she did wake up, she fell back asleep faster. She didn't think the two things were connected at first, but then she realized that starting her day more calmly might be helping her end her day more calmly too. And that makes sense, because the way you start your day affects how your nervous system behaves for the rest of the day. If you start in a state of calm, your nervous system is more likely to stay regulated. If you start in a state of activation, even mild activation, your nervous system stays a little bit elevated all day. And that elevated state makes it harder to wind down at night. So even though this habit is about the morning, it can have effects that ripple through the whole day and into the evening, not for everyone, but for a lot of people. Now, I want to talk briefly about what happens when life gets in the way, because I know that not every morning is going to be the same. Some mornings you're going to wake up late. Some mornings you're going to have an appointment or an emergency or something that pulls your attention immediately. And on those mornings, you might not have 60 seconds to sit quietly. And that's fine. This isn't about perfection. It's about consistency, not rigidity. If you miss a morning, you just pick it up again the next day. You don't need to make up for it. You don't need to do extra. You just go back to the habit when you can. The goal isn't to do it every single day, without exception. The goal is to do it most days so that it becomes your default, so that your brain starts to expect it. And once that happens, even the days when you don't do it won't throw you off as much because your brain has already built the pattern. She asked me toward the end of our conversation whether she should tell her friends about this. She said a few of them had been complaining about the same kinds of things: trouble focusing, feeling mentally slow, that sense of being a step behind. And I told her yes. I told her it's worth sharing, because this is one of those things that's so simple, people often dismiss it. But simple doesn't mean ineffective. I also told her that it might not work for everyone. Some of her friends might try it and notice a difference right away. Others might try it and not notice anything. And that's okay. The point isn't to convince anyone. The point is just to offer it as an option. Because a lot of people don't realize that they have options. They assume that mental fatigue and cognitive slowing are just part of getting older, and there's nothing they can do about it. And while some of that is inevitable, a lot of it is manageable, not fixable, but manageable. And managing it doesn't require expensive supplements or complicated routines or dramatic lifestyle changes. It just requires paying attention to how your brain works and giving it what it needs to work well. So here's what I'd suggest. If you're someone who's been feeling like your brain isn't quite as sharp as it used to be, if you've been noticing that mornings are hard, or that you're having trouble keeping up with conversations, or that you're mentally exhausted by the afternoon even though you haven't done anything particularly demanding, try this just for a week. Sit at the edge of your bed when you first wake up, feet on the floor, hands in your lap, and take 5 or 6 slow breaths before you do anything else, before you check your phone, before you turn on the television, before you start your day. Do that for a week and see if anything changes. Not in a big way, just in small ways. In how the morning feels, in how clearly you're thinking by mid-morning, in how tired you are by the afternoon, and if you notice even a small difference, keep doing it, because those small differences matter. And if you don't notice a difference, that's okay too. It just means your brain might need something else. And that's worth figuring out with your doctor. But for a lot of people, especially people over 60 who are otherwise healthy but just feel like they're not quite keeping up, this one small habit can make a real difference. Not because it's magic, but because it gives the brain what it needs most at the start of the day. A moment of quiet, a chance to settle, a little bit of space before the noise begins. If you found this helpful, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe to Everyday Health Podcast and turn on notifications so you don't miss future conversations. I'd also love to hear from you. What's one thing you've noticed about how your brain works differently now than it did 10 or 20 years ago?